Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be listening to Fall and What Comes After, the debut album from the Italian singer-songwriter Marco Ragozza.
Oh, wow.
Huge thanks, as always, to Dulaxi for making this deep dive possible.
Yes, thank you, Dulaxi.
So this album is kind of a big deal because Marco was stepping out on his own after, years of training in Italy and then honing his skills at London's ICMP.
Right.
He's played in bands, he's soaked up the London scene, and now he's kind of pouring all of that experience into something really, really personal and.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the reviewer kind of, points out or describes this album as an immersive emotional experience.
Yeah.
It's not just like putting on some music, in the background. It's something that you kind of really have to listen to.
Right, and it goes deep, too. We're talking like yearning, despair, even touching on suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, it gets heavy.
But there's this like thread of hope woven throughout. So
Yeah.
It's definitely not just all doom and gloom. It's heavy, but it's also beautifully crafted.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, what stands out to you as particularly intriguing about this artist or album?
Well, you mentioned that kind of, tension between the rawness and authenticity of the music. And, this is still a polished professional recording.
Right.
But the reviewer actually praises the unpolished quality of it.
Yeah.
They say that it really lets Ragozza's authenticity come through.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like the imperfections kind of make it more real in a way, more human.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's unpack some of the tracks the reviewer highlighted, starting with the opener, No Rebels Here.
Yeah.
And, it starts so softly, it draws you in almost like a whisper
Yeah.
before it builds to something much bigger.
And that use of dynamics, I think, is just so powerful. It's not just about getting louder.
Right.
It's taking you on that kind of emotional journey with it. And the reviewer uses terms like, fragile yet captivating essence and eerie authenticity, which I think really kind of captures that feeling of being drawn in by that softness, but then it kind of sneaks up on you, that intensity, and then it kind of leaves you breathless.
Then we shift gears to track 3, Another Man.
Right.
This one's got like a driving beat, a rhythmic guitar, just like a totally different energy.
Yeah.
And the reviewer called it restless intensity. And I think that's the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, and you've got, the rumbling bass line, the persistent drums, and then you've got these bursts of distortion and gritty guitar tones.
Oh, wow.
That just kind of pierce through the texture, and it's a stark contrast to the opener.
Right.
But somehow it all kind of fits together on this journey that the album takes you on.
Absolutely. And there's this tension like throughout, like a constant push and pull between holding back and letting go, which I think makes it even more compelling.
Yeah.
It's like watching someone wrestle with their emotions in real time.
Yeah.
Now, track 5, Forget Her, takes us in a completely different direction.
Okay.
Because this one begins with like these hushed vocals, almost like a secret being shared.
Yeah. And the instrumentation is so sparse.
Right.
And it really leaves space for the vocals to kind of breathe. And the reviewer, highlights the interplay between the voice and the instruments and kind of describes it as a conversation.
Interesting.
Which I think is so powerful. It's like how restraint can sometimes be as impactful as just a wall of sound.
Totally. It makes you lean in. You're trying to catch every word, every nuance. And then it builds to this emotional climax.
Right.
Where the song breaks free from its restraint, but it still feels unresolved.
Yeah.
It kind of leaves you wanting more.
It does. And then you come to the closing track, Sad for No Reason.
Yeah.
And it starts so delicately, almost fragile, and then builds to this cathartic release of emotion. And then it recedes back to this kind of stillness.
It's such a poignant way to end the album. It leaves you with this sense of reflection.
Yeah.
This quiet contemplation after the storm.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think makes this track such an effective closer?
Well, I think it ties back to the kind of overall themes of yearning and despair.
Yeah.
But it also offers this kind of sense of resolution. It's like a feeling of coming full circle.
Yeah.
It's like Ragozza is saying, yes, life is hard, but there's beauty in the sadness too.
I love that perspective. It's not about ignoring the difficult emotions. It's about acknowledging them. And then finding a way to move forward.
Exactly.
So we've talked about individual tracks. We've touched on the overall feel of the album. But what about Ragozza himself?
Right.
What can we glean about him as an artist through this work?
Well, the reviewer, mentions Ragozza's 7 years of training in Italy before he moved to London to refine his craft at ICMP.
Yeah.
And then his time playing in bands, absorbing the London music scene. And now this solo debut, seems like he's always searching, always pushing himself further.
And you can really hear that evolution in the music. It's not just about like technical skill.
Right.
It's about the emotional depth, pushing those boundaries and expressing something truly authentic.
Yeah, and the reviewer, they highlight this, saying the production was intentionally unpolished to allow his authenticity to kind of shine through.
It's like he's stripping away all artifice
Yeah.
and just giving us something real, something raw.
Exactly.
I'm curious, what role do you think his background plays in shaping his sound and his themes?
Well, that's a great point. The reviewer does point out, how his Italian roots influence the music.
Yeah.
But he's also deeply immersed in that London scene.
Right.
So it's almost like he's blending those two worlds, creating something entirely unique.
It's like he's bridging the gap between two cultures, two musical landscapes, and in doing so, kind of forging his own path.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the challenges and the triumphs, of finding your own voice and your place in the world, especially as an artist.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, where does he go from here?
Right.
Fall and what comes after is such a powerful statement.
Right.
But it also feels like a beginning.
I'm eager to see what he does next.
Yeah.
Will he continue to explore these themes? Will he experiment with new sounds? Only time will tell. But I have a feeling we haven't heard the last from Marco Ragozza.
I don't think so either.
Well, before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, I want to pause and ask you, our listener, what's resonating with you the most so far? Is it the raw emotion, the clever use of dynamics, or perhaps something else entirely? Hold on to that thought as we delve a little deeper into Marco Ragozza's world.
Yeah.
See you in a bit.
See ya. Welcome back to our deep dive into Marco Ragozza's Fall and what comes after. Something we touched on earlier was that thread of hope running through the album. It's not just about darkness. There's a glimmer of light, a sense of resilience that's really powerful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It would be so easy to just get lost in the heaviness of it all. But there is a strength there too, like a fight to keep going even when things are tough.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, what is the significance of that hopefulness amidst all the emotional turmoil?
Well, the reviewer doesn't explicitly address that, but I think it speaks to the complexity of human experience. Life isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and Ragozza isn't afraid to explore those darker corners. But by weaving in that thread of hope, he's acknowledging the possibility of finding light even in the darkest moments.
That's such a powerful message.
Yeah.
It's not about pretending that everything's okay.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the struggle and still choosing to believe in something better.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about individual tracks. We've touched on the overall feel of the album. But what about Ragozza himself? Like, what can we glean about him as an artist through this work?
That's a great question. The reviewer does mention his 7 years of training in Italy.
Right.
Before moving to London to refine his craft at ICMP.
Right.
And then his time playing in bands, absorbing the London music scene, and now this solo debut. It seems like he's always searching, always pushing himself further.
And you can really hear that evolution in the music. Like, it's not just about technical skill.
Right.
It's about the emotional depth, pushing those boundaries, and expressing something truly authentic.
Exactly. And the reviewer highlights this, saying the production was intentionally unpolished.
Right.
To allow his authenticity to kind of shine through.
It's like he's stripping away all artifice and just giving us something real, something raw.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what role do you think his background plays in shaping his sound and themes?
Well, that's an interesting angle because the reviewer does point out how his Italian roots influence the music.
Yeah.
But he's also deeply immersed in that London scene.
Right.
So it's almost like he's blending those two worlds together, creating something entirely unique.
It's like he's bridging the gap between two cultures, two musical landscapes, and in doing so, kind of forging his own path.
Yeah.
It makes me think about the challenges and triumphs of finding your voice, your place in the world, especially as an artist.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, where does he go from here? Fall and what comes after is such a powerful statement, but it also feels like a beginning.
I'm eager to see what he does next. Will he continue to explore these same themes? Will he experiment with new sounds? Only time will tell.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling we haven't heard the last from Marco Ragozza.
Me neither.
We've talked a lot about the music and the production, but I want to circle back to the lyrics for a second. We know that they delve into yearning, despair, even suicidal thoughts. But there's also that thread of hope. Can you elaborate a little bit on the power and significance of those lyrics?
Well, the reviewer doesn't quote specific lyrics, but they describe them as deeply personal yet universal. They tap into those shared human experiences of love, loss, longing, the search for meaning.
Sometimes the simplest words can hit the hardest. It's not always about fancy metaphors or poetic language.
Right.
It's about that raw honesty, that vulnerability that makes you feel seen and understood.
Yeah, and the way that he delivers those lyrics adds another layer. The reviewer describes his voice as having both tender delicacy and powerful intensity.
Yeah.
It's like he knows exactly how to use his voice to convey that full spectrum of emotion.
It really makes me think about the emotional journey that the album takes us on.
Yeah.
The reviewer uses the phrase immersive emotional experience, but they never really define what that means.
Right.
What do you think they mean by that?
To me, it means this isn't just background music.
Yeah.
This isn't something that you passively listen to.
Right.
It demands your attention. It makes you feel things, maybe even things you'd rather avoid.
It's almost like he's inviting us to step inside his world to experience those emotions alongside him. And it's uncomfortable at times.
It can be.
But it's also incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
There's a courage in that vulnerability, a willingness to lay yourself bare and say, this is me, this is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he creates a space for us to do the same. So before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have a question for you, our listener. What resonates most with you about Marco Ragozza's approach? Is it the emotional honesty, the way he blends different musical influences, or perhaps something else entirely better? Keep that in mind as we head into the final part of our exploration.
Yeah, see you there.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we've been talking all about Marco Ragozza's Fall and what comes after. And man, this album is really sticking with me.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Like, there's so much to unpack here.
Definitely, we've talked about the rawness, the emotional honesty, but I think what really strikes me is how he balances that vulnerability with moments of real power.
Yeah, it is like a delicate dance almost.
It is.
Like you get pulled in by that quiet intimacy,
Right.
fragility in his voice, and then suddenly, bam, you're hit with this wave of emotion, this intensity that just knocks you back.
But it never feels manipulative.
Right.
It's genuine. It's authentic. It's like he's just channeling those experiences right into the music. And we as listeners are privileged to kind of witness that process.
Yeah, it's like eavesdropping on someone's innermost thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And there's something so compelling about that kind of honesty,
Mm-hmm.
even if it makes you a little uncomfortable at times.
Oh, for sure.
Like it challenges the idea that music has to be purely for entertainment,
Absolutely. Sometimes the most powerful art is the kind that forces us to confront those difficult emotions,
Right.
to sit with the uncomfortable truths, and Fall and what comes after certainly does that.
It does, but it also offers those moments of beauty, of transcendence
Right.
that make the whole journey worthwhile.
Yeah.
It's like he's reminding us that even in the midst of all the darkness and despair, there's still those glimmers of hope,
There are, and I think those moments of beauty kind of make the darkness feel that much more profound.
Yeah, I think so. It's like he's saying, yes, life is messy and painful, but there's also beauty to be found in the brokenness and the imperfections.
Exactly.
And that's such a powerful message.
Yeah.
One that I think really resonates with a lot of people, especially these days.
I think so.
I mean, so much of what we see and hear is so filtered and polished and perfect.
It is.
But this album feels real. It feels human.
Yeah, it's refreshing, isn't it, to hear someone bearing their soul flaws and all just saying, this is me.
It makes you wonder how many other artists are out there just waiting to share their stories, their truths.
I know, right?
What kind of impact could that have on the world?
Yeah.
What would it look like if we all embraced that kind of vulnerability, that rawness?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe it would lead to more empathy, more understanding.
Yeah.
Maybe we'd all feel a little less alone in our struggles.
I think you're right. Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Marco Ragozza's Fall and what comes after.
Wow.
This album has really left a mark on me.
Me too.
It's challenged me, it's moved me, it's given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely an album that stays with you long after the music stops.
Right.
And I think that's really the mark of truly great art,
Yeah.
It sparks conversations, it provokes thought, it invites us to reflect on our own experiences.
If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out Marco Ragozza's Fall and what comes after.
Please do.
And a huge thank you once again to Dulaxi for sponsoring this deep dive.
Yes. Thank you, Dulaxi.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep diving deep.
See.